Hello there. In this class, we are going to look at how to write percentages as decimals. How to write or express percentages as decimals. This can basically be achieved by first expressing the given percentage as a fraction that is out of 100, and then you divide it. That is the simple operation that we are going to carry out. We express the given percentage as a fraction out of 100, and then we divide it. This will be illustrated in these examples that will follow. The first example is how do we express 93% as a decimal. We have said the first step that we are going to do is we express 93% as a fraction, which will give us 93% will be equal to 93 all over 100. Then the second step, we carry out division. We carry out division. And this division, it is important to note that it is basically as moving, it is the same as moving the decimal point 2 places to the left. That is 93 divided by 100 will give us 0.93. Let us now look at another example. Expressing 7% as a decimal. The steps that we have just mentioned in the first example will apply in this example also. We express 7% as a fraction. Then step number 2, we carry out division. And remember this particular division, since in the denominator we have a number with 2 zeros, it is the same as moving the decimal point 2 places to the left. Our third example can be a number like this one, 200%. We express it as a decimal. Our first step, we express 200% as a fraction, which will be 200 out of 100. Then we proceed with the division. Actually, when you look at division of 200 by 100, this one we are going to cancel the zeros and it will give us 2 out of 1, which is the same as 2.0. That is what we have. We can look at our last example. That is example number 4. We express 11.3% as a decimal. The same steps that we have used to solve the first 3 examples will also apply in this. This is a very cheap operation. And our first step is to express the given percentage, which is 11.3%, as a fraction. Which will be equal to 11.3 out of 100. Then the second step is division. Which we have said this division is just the same as moving the decimal point 2 places to the right, to the left, sorry, that is 2 places to the left. Having looked at expressing percentages as fractions and also expressing percentages as decimals, I now want us to move on and look at how do we find the percentage of a given quantity, finding a percentage of a quantity. How do we find the percentage of a given quantity? This basically means we are given a certain quantity, then they want us to find its percentage. And to execute that, there are 2 steps, 2 vital steps that should be followed to carry out this particular operation. And the first step, we write the percentage that we would wish to find as a fraction or a decimal. Then we multiply that particular fraction that we have obtained or a decimal by that particular given quantity. We will demonstrate this using examples. And our first example is for us to find 42% of 1,800 pounds. 42% of 1,800 pounds. And it is important to note that this particular word of simply means multiplication. This word simply means multiplication. In our first step, we have said you express this particular percentage as a fraction. 42% expressed as a fraction or a decimal. This will be 42 out of 100, which is actually equivalent to 0.42 as we have just learned. Then the second step, we multiply this particular fraction or decimal that we have here with the quantity that we are given. We want to know this 42% represents which amount in 1,800 pounds. This will be 42 out of 100 multiplied by 1,800 pounds. We can cancel this zero, these zeros, then we remain with 42 multiplied by 18 pounds, which actually will give us 750 pounds. This means that 42% of the 1,800 pounds is equivalent to 750 pounds. This was our first example. Let us look at more examples of the same. The second example requires us to find 10% of 250 pounds. 10% of 250 pounds. Our two steps will come in handy when we are solving this. We first of all express 10% as a fraction or a decimal. 10% is equivalent to 10 out of 100. Then our second step, step number 2, we multiply that particular fraction by the quantity that we are given. This 0 and this one can cancel, this one can cancel with that, leaving us with 25 pounds. Remember, it is important to indicate the quantities or the units. If you are talking about masses, let the units of mass be well indicated. And if you are talking about currency, let the units also be indicated. Our example number 3, it requires us to find 17.5% of 2,000 meters. 17.5% of 2,000 meters. We express 17.5 as a fraction. Then the second step is for us to multiply that particular fraction by the quantity. When we cancel the zeros, we will get 17.5 multiplied by 20. Let us arrange the numbers in column form so that we can carry out our calculation manually. But if you have a calculator, you can use it. 0 multiplied by 5, we get 0. 0 multiplied by 7, it is 0. 0 multiplied by 1, we will get 0. Then 2 multiplied by 5, it will give us 10, carry 1. 2 multiplied by 7, it will give us 14 plus 1, that will be 15. We write 5, we carry another 1. Then 2 multiplied by 1, it will give us 2. We add on the carried 1, then we will get 3. Then we proceed with addition. We ask ourselves, how many decimal places do we have? We only have 1, so we are going to have our decimal place there. This will give us 350 meters. This means that 17.5% of 2,000 meters is equal to 350 meters. That will be equal to 350 meters. We can move on to other examples that are a bit involving than the initial 3. This is example number 4. We are required to carry out the following task. And the question is, a 300-gram pie contains 15 grams of saturated fat. There we have our statement. A 300-gram pie contains 15 grams of saturated fat. Then our first question is, what fraction of the pie is saturated fat? What fraction of the pie is saturated fat? And the second question is, what percentage of the pie is saturated? Those are the two questions arising from this particular statement. A 300 gram pie contains 15 grams of saturated fat. So we are going to deal with the first question, which actually will help us to solve the second question. From the statement, we are told that out of the 300 grams, it is only 15 grams that is saturated, that contains saturated fat. So it is basically 15 grams out of 300. If we can express this as a fraction, then this will be 15 grams out of 300 grams, and the units will cancel out, giving us 15 out of 300. And this fraction can be simplified further. The highest common factor of 15 and 300 is the number 15. So we'll say 15 into 15 once, 15 into 300 is 20 times. So the fraction that is saturated will be 1 out of 20. That is a simple fraction, will be 1 out of 20. And the second question requires us to find the percentage of the pie that is actually saturated. And we already have the fraction. So basically what they want us to do is to express this particular fraction as a percentage. And in our previous lessons, we have already dealt with that. So this particular second question requires us to express 1 out of 20 as a percentage, which basically means we are going to multiply by 100%. And when we do that, 1 out of 20 will be the same as 5%. It is only 5% of the pie that is saturated with fats. Our next example, I will write it down. About 80% of the mass of a human body is water. If James is 70 kgs, how many kilograms of water are in his body? It is a statement followed by a question. So if 80% of his body is made up of water, and we have been given the total mass, his mass, are we able to find the number of kilograms represented by this percentage? And in so doing, we'll have found the number of kilograms of water contained in his body. So this is 80% of 70 kilograms. Remember, the word of means multiplication, and before we find this particular percentage, in our first, second, and third examples, we have learned that we first of all express this particular percentage as a fraction. Then we proceed by multiplying that particular fraction by the quantity. So this will be 80 out of 100 multiplied by 70 kgs. This 0 and that will cancel, and this one and that one will cancel, giving us 8 multiplied by 7 kgs, and this will give us 8 multiplied by 7, giving us 56 kgs. This 56 kgs is the amount of water in terms of kilograms contained in James's body. Lastly, let us look at another example. Example number 6. I'll write it down. Jane spends 12% of 6.6 hours school day in a mathematics class. Jane spends 12% of 6.6 hour school day in a mathematics class. This means the total time spent in school is only 6.6 hours, of which 12% is used in attending mathematics class. And the question is, how many minutes are spent in the maths classroom? How many minutes are spent in the maths classroom? Remember, the time or the period that we are given, that this lady spends in the school, is given in hours, and the question requires us to find the number of minutes that are spent in a mathematics class. So we first of all have to convert the hours into minutes before we find 12% of those minutes that we will have obtained. (6.6 hours), this is the same as 6.6 multiplied by 60 minutes, because 1 hour is equivalent to 60 minutes. This will actually give us this will give us 396 minutes. Then we go ahead and calculate 12% of the 396 minutes. And to do that, we convert the 12% into a fraction. This will be 12 out of 100. Then we multiply by the number of minutes that we have. And this will give us 47.52 minutes to 2 decimal places. You can confirm that using a calculator. Having looked at how to find the percentage of a given quantity, I now want us to look at application of percentages. We have learned so much about percentages, and it is good that we know how these percentages or the knowledge we have learned can be applied. These percentages, or the knowledge on percentages, has a very wide application. If prices are increased by a given percentage, that is prices of commodities, if they are increased by a given percentage, we get to create profit to the person selling those commodities. And if it happens that the prices have been reduced by a given percentage, we will end up giving some discount to the person buying those commodities. And the best way to explain that, we can have an example of a store outsourcing pies from a bakery at a cost of 20 pounds. Then this store or the manager goes ahead, repackages these particular pies, and she or he attaches a price tag of 30 pounds. Remember, this person has just outsourced these pies at 20 pounds, intending to sell them at 30 pounds. So the price at which this store gets these pies from the bakery is called the cost price. It is called the cost price. And in this case, this cost price is actually 20 pounds. So the cost price is $20. And this particular store is selling the same pies after repackaging and maybe branding at $30. So this $30 represents what we call the selling price. The selling price is $30. So if you look at these two figures, these two amounts, you will discover that the first amount has been increased by a certain percentage to get this particular second amount, which is the selling price. And as I had said earlier, that if that happens, we create profit to the person selling those particular pies. So basically from this we can say that for us to obtain profit, profit is basically the difference between the selling price and the cost price. And in this example that I've just given you, the profit will be equal to $30 minus $20, giving us $10. The store manager or the person who owns the store will be making a profit of $20. And from this particular figure, we can be able to calculate the percentage profit, as we will see much later in this particular lesson. But there is a second scenario whereby the price tag after rebranding and repackaging is $30. But the customer comes and tries to bargain, and the store attendant decides to sell the pie at, let us say, something like $25. The store attendant will still make a profit, but not as much as he or she will have sold the same at $30. So this reduction of $5 is what we call discount. A discount. A discount, which will be equal to the price attached on those pies minus the negotiated price, which is 25, giving us $5. So the $5 that we get here is basically the discount, and this particular amount can also translate to percentage discount. Having said that, I want us now to move on and look at how do we increase given amounts or quantities by a given percentage, and later on we can look at how do we reduce given quantities or amounts by given percentages. That is increasing a quantity by a given percentage. Increasing a given quantity by a given percentage. Now, there are a few steps involved when we want to carry out this particular operation. And the first one is for us to get the sum, of the percentages, because we assume that that given quantity is 100%. So if we are going to increase it by a given percentage, then we are going to have a new percentage. So we get the sum the sum of the percentages. The second step is for us to express the percentage as a fraction or a decimal, as the case might be. Then lastly, we multiply that fraction or decimal by the quantity that we have been given. It is important to take note of the word sum in this first step. The sum. Let us look at examples. The first example requires us to increase $370 by 8%. By 8%. And from the steps above here, starting the first one, we get the sum. The sum, which will be 100% plus 8%, giving us 108%. Our second step is to express this particular percentage as a fraction. 108%, we have already learned this on how to express given percentages as fractions. 108% is the same as 108 all over 100. And our last step, step number 3, requires us to multiply the fraction by the quantity that we are given, which will be 108 multiplied by $370. $370. This will give us $399.60. This is just but one of the examples. I want us to continue looking at more examples. Our example number 2, increase $90 by 5%. And as we have learned, our first step is for us to get the sum of the percentages. And in fact, we actually take $90 to be equal to 100%. So if we are going to increase it by 5%, then the new amount we are going to have will be 105%. That is why we get the sum of the percentages. This will be 100% plus 5%, giving us 105%. Giving us 105%. And our second step is to express 105% as a fraction or a decimal. which is actually 105 out of 100. There's no need of simplifying this particular fraction. We can do that much later. But as for now, we just use that particular fraction the way it is. And our last step is to multiply this fraction that we have obtained by our amount. This 0 and this one will cancel out. So we are going to remain with 105 multiplied by 9, then divided by 10. I would prefer that we carry out multiplication of the numerator first before we carry out division by the denominator. Let me arrange these particular numbers here. 105 multiplied by 9 in column form. When we multiply 9 by 5, this gives us 45. We write 5 and we carry 4. 9 multiplied by 0, we get as 0 plus 4. That will give us 4. And 9 multiplied by 1, it will give us 9. So this, the numerator here we are going to have, after multiplication, we will have 945 divided by 10. And when we are dividing by 10, it's just like moving the decimal place, which is assumed to be somewhere here, one place to the left because of the 1 0. And this will give us 94.5 dollars. $94.5. There is another method that is also applied to solve the same. It is called cross multiplication, whereby we assume the initial amount is equal to 100%. Then we try to find out the amount that will be represented by the new percentage that we have after finding the sum. I think it is prudent that we use this particular example to try and do the same, so that we can have more than one way or more than one method of solving the same. And this method can also apply in the first example. This is whereby we say 100% is equal to $90. Then we find the sum. What about 105%? This will be equal to which? This will be equal to which amount? And this particular amount, we can represent it using a known letter. We can even use a letter K. Then we cross multiply. We carry out what we call cross multiplication. This 105% will be multiplied by that, and that should be equal to 100% multiplied by K. So we will have 100% multiplied by this unknown amount that we are trying to get, and we equate the same to the product of 105% and 90%. When we do that, we can divide through by 100% so that we remain with this K on one side. This one and this one cancels, and our K will be the same as, if we rearrange this, is the same as 105% all over 100% multiplied by $90. And remember, percent and percent will cancel. This will give us 94.5 dollars that we had obtained earlier on. Let us look at one more example before we move on to the next concept. That is example number 3. We increase 400 liters of water by 10%. We increase 400 liters of water by 10%. This, if we use our first method, we have our step number 1 where we are required to express this particular percentage as a fraction. To increase 400 liters of water by 10%, our first step is for us to find the sum of the percentages. Remember, we have 3 steps. The first one is to find the sum of 100% plus the 10%. And this will give us 110%. Our second step is for us to express this percentage as a fraction, which will be 110 all over 100. And our last step is to multiply this particular fraction by the quantity that we are given. These zeros can cancel out. We are left with 11 multiplied by 40 liters. And when we multiply 11 by 40, this is the same as 440 liters. It is important that we remember to indicate the units. So even when we try to compare this final quantity that we have to the initial one, you'll actually realize that it has been increased. Remember, our intention was to increase this particular quantity by 10%. So it has increased from 400 liters to 440 liters. It has an increase of 10%, and that increase is equal to 40 liters. Having looked at increasing given quantities by a given percentage, it is also prudent that we look at how to decrease or reduce them by a given percentage so that we have a new quantity that is less or smaller than the initial one. That now leads me to the next subtopic, that is decreasing by a given percentage. increasing quantities by a given or a certain percentage. Now, this one also has its 3 vital steps that we need to follow when carrying out this particular operation. They are somehow related to the previous ones that we have just learned. And remember, I had told you to take note of the word sum in the first step when we were increasing quantities by a given percentage. So in this one, the first step is for us to get the difference and not the sum as it were in the previous one. We get the difference, take note of that, of the percentages. Then our second step I know by now you can even guess the step itself. It is actually expressing the percentage, the new percentage, as a fraction. As a fraction or even a decimal. But it is easy to work with fractions. And the last step is for us to multiply the fraction by the quantity given. Let us go through examples, several examples, so that you can also internalize the 3 vital steps that we have just illustrated here. And our first example is requires us to decrease we are required to decrease 8,900 cubic centimeters of milk by 7%. Decrease 8,900 cubic centimeters of milk by 7%. We'll apply these particular steps that we have learned up here. And our step number 1 requires us to get the difference, because we assume that this 8,900 cubic centimeters of milk is equal to 100%. So we want to get a percentage lower than that, so that at the end of it all, the amount of milk that we are going to have will be much less than this. So this will be 100% minus 7%, which will give us 93%. This is the new percentage that we are going to use. And our second step, as illustrated up there, it requires us to express that new percentage as a fraction or a decimal, but I've told you that it is easier for us to work with it as a fraction, even without simplification, so that we can move with speed. 93% will be the same as 93 out of 100. And our last step is for us to multiply this particular fraction by the quantity that we are given, and in this case our quantity is 8,900 cubic centimeters. Cubic centimeters. These two zeros will cancel out with these two zeros, and this will leave us with 93 multiplied by 89 cubic centimeters. So for us to get the product of 93 and 89, we will be required to arrange these particular numbers in column form so that we carry out multiplication. But if you have the calculator, you can punch in the values and get the answer very fast. So this will be 93 multiplied by 89. Now 9 multiplied by 3 will give us 27. We write 7 and carry 2. 9 multiplied by 9, it will give us 81, but remember we had carried 2, so when we add on 81 plus 2, it will give us 83. Then 8 multiplied by 3 will give us 24. We write 4, carry 2. Then 8 multiplied by 9, it will actually give us 72 plus the 2 that we had carried on, that will be 74. Then we proceed with normal addition. This will be 7, this will be 7, this will be 8 plus 4, it will give us 12. We write 2, carry 1, 7 plus 1, it will give us 8. So we are saying that 93 multiplied by 89 cubic centimeters will actually give us 8,277 cubic centimeters. So a reduction of 7% on 8,900 cubic centimeters will lead us to 8,277 cubic centimeters. Let us look at one more example. We are required to decrease 1,500 or $1,500 by 5%. Very fast, we go through our steps. Step number 1, remember it requires us to get the difference in percentages so that we can have our new percentage. That is 100%. Subtract this given percentage, which is 5%, and this will lead us to 95%. And this new percentage is the one that we are going to express as a fraction, and 95% we have said is the same as 95 out of 100. And our third step is for us to multiply this fraction that we have by the quantity so that we can get our new, by this particular amount so that we can get the new amount. This will be 95 out of 100 multiplied by $1,500. This 0 and this one cancels, this one and this one cancels, so we are left with 95 multiplied by 15. When we arrange them in column form and multiply, 5 multiplied by 5, it will give us 25, carry 2. This will be 45 plus 2, 47. 1 multiplied by 5, it will be 5. 1 multiplied by 9 will get 9. Then we add. When we add, we will have 5. 7 plus 5, it will be 12. Carry 1. 1 plus 4, it will be 5. 5 plus 9, it will be 14. So this will give us $1,425. Actually, when you look at it, this is a reduction from the initial one that we had, which was 1,500. After a 5% reduction or decrease, we end up with 1,425. That brings us to the end of today's lesson. When we meet next time, we'll be looking at how to calculate profits and percentage profits. A very interesting lesson that you'll not wish to miss. Thank you.